Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. We have 5 board members present, 2 absent. The board has been in closed session since 6 o'clock for 3 items. One is collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for 1 or more classes of employees. 2, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed session. And 3rd, approval of January 23rd, 2018 and February 13th, 2018 closed session minutes. Could we rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next we have public comments. The board will receive public comments for up to 3 minutes. And we have 2 names here on the speakers list. The first is Gail Ronan. Yeah, you can come to the podium.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. On Saturday during public comment, my colleague from Elmhurst Cool Cities Coalition spoke about the benefits of green schools. Just to summarize, green schools reduce energy and water usage and costs, improve indoor air quality, increase natural light, decrease carbon emissions, and improve the learning environment. Stormwater mitigation is part of that list, and we were thrilled to learn that this is part of the Facilities Improvement Plan. We learned that no specific stormwater mitigation plans have been proposed to date, but as those plans are developed, we'd like to be included in those conversations. There may be ways to reduce the overall cost on stormwater mitigation. As you are well aware, the City of Elmhurst has spent $25 million to alleviate flooding for residential areas, and in some cases, partnered with District 205 to utilize property to do so. We suggest investigating whether it is possible to tie into the city's stormwater infrastructure and mitigation programs to alleviate flooding at individual schools. Additionally, there may be grant opportunities to help pay for this portion of the plan. There could be money at the federal, state, and/or local level to assist with school flooding. We know that DuPage County grants were recently awarded to Woodridge School District 68, helping to fund the installation of a permeable paver parking lot, as well as reading and a rain garden. Our Cool Cities members have implemented successful stormwater mitigation efforts, and we encourage you to reach out to them to learn more. For example, Elmhurst College installed a network of cisterns to collect and store stormwater. The collected water is then reused for landscaping and maintenance, to water plants, to water flowers, plants, grass, and trees. The college also has a permeable parking lot to absorb rainwater and filter runoff. The Elmhurst Park District has a green roof on their headquarters building and has built numerous rain gardens throughout their parks that use deep-rooted native plants to absorb stormwater. And through a DuPage County grant, the City of Elmhurst installed a rain garden at the Elmhurst Police Station. When looking at stormwater through a sustainability lens, you'll find that a small investment upfront can go a long way in saving money over the long run, keeping water where it falls for later reuse, creating natural filters for runoff, increasing productivity for maintenance staff, providing educational opportunities for students in the areas of climate and energy science, beautifying the built environment, and enhancing the district's image as an environmental steward. On behalf of Cool Cities, we believe it is worth taking the time to investigate stormwater management solutions and alternative funding for these projects, which may help reduce the final dollar figure tied to any future referendum. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration, and have a nice evening. And I've got some material we'd like to leave with you. It's the discussion plus some background material regarding the work that the college did and some of the other efforts locally. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is Karen Stazowski.
Hello, Karen Stazowski, 487 South York Street. I wanted to just quickly say that I appreciate the attention that the district's been giving towards school safety. As a parent, it's something that, of course, is on everybody's mind. The one thing that I wanted to share, though, is that the thought of, and I have no idea if anybody's discussing this or not, but the thought of any kind of weapons in the school is very disturbing to our family and very disturbing to our kids. And I just want to put that out there. But thanks, I do appreciate the attention, and I'm sure you're all working on a plan. So see ya.
Okay, thank you. And we don't respond right now. I'm not sure if I said that on Saturday, but we do follow up after the meeting to public comments. Are there other public comments for tonight? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to approval of board meeting minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes, January 23rd, January 27th, and February 13th. Are there any additions, corrections, or comments? Okay, the minutes will stand as presented. Superintendent's consent agenda. I need a motion for items A through I.
I move that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's consent agenda items A through I.
There's a second? Okay, moved by Karen, second by Kara. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't ask if a board member wanted to remove an item. Okay. Okay, so moved by Karen, seconded by Kara for the consent agenda items A through I. Go ahead.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes?
Mrs. Kaforiel?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, it's 5 ayes, no nays, 2 absent. That motion passes. Superintendent's action items.
Okay, action item A, there are 2 donations. One, Bryan Middle School, and one, Emerson. And the recommended action for Bryan would be that we accept the donations in the amount of $1,375 for 4 banners that would line the Bryan School parking lot when people enter the premises, similar to the types of things you see when you drive into the York parking lot. And the second donation is Emerson, and that is in the amount of $3,800 for signage and $6,000 for labor and materials for a teaching garden. The signage would be a partnership with the Emerson Student Council, and that sign would be out in front of the school. And then the teaching garden is explained in your packet, and that would be an opportunity to tie to the curriculum some various different things about food choices. And so that project is $6,000. So $3,800 for the signage, $6,000 for the teaching garden. So the recommendation is that we would accept these donations, $1,375 for 4 banners at Bryan Middle School, $3,800 for the wooden signage at Emerson, and $6,000 for labor and materials for the teaching garden at Emerson.
Okay, I think I was assigned for this one. So I'll go ahead and make the recommendation that the Board of Education approve acceptance of the donation to Bryan Middle School in the amount of $1,375 for 4 banners, and to Emerson Elementary School in the amount of $3,800 for wooden signage and $6,000 for labor and materials for a teaching garden. There's a second?
A second.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to thank the PTA from Bryan and also the parents from Emerson, and then also Clark Construction. I believe that's an in-kind donation for the labor and materials for the garden. So I just want to say thank you. These are, the sign is, most of our schools have that type of signage, so this is good to be consistent for the sign in front of the school. And the teaching garden is something that we have at several schools, and it's great for kids. So thank you. So we have a roll call vote.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
It's 5 ayes, no nays, 2 absent. That motion carries. We have approval of study skills instructional program stipends.
Yes, since 2007, the foundation has been supporting this program. This year, there are 5 elementary schools that would like to participate in the program: Emerson, Hawthorne, Jackson, Fisher, and Lincoln. And the total amount is $12,000, up to $12,000 that the foundation would allocate to supporting some academic support for students who need some extra assistance. There is some explanation in the packet because we have restructured different ways we approach things. Some schools are participating in this, but some other schools that have participated in the past are not. But the program exists for those who believe it will help support their students, and so we would recommend that you accept the foundation support up to $12,000 for the Study Skills Academies at those 5 elementary schools.
Go ahead.
I move that the Board of Education approve the acceptance of the award of up to $12,000 for the 2017-2018 Study Skills Academy as funded by the District 205 Foundation. I also want to take a moment here and thank the foundation for their continual support of our schools. Most appreciative, this was offered to all schools. And the foundation continues to support the schools in a variety of different ways. And we appreciate this as well as the themes grants that they routinely do throughout the year.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Margaret, second by John. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, that's 5 ayes, no nays, 2 absent. The motion passes. Moving to, well, we're moving quickly here. Superintendent's communication, community engagement process, part 2. So we have Marcia Sutter here. Thank you.
Correct. So Marcia is here. We've been talking about this at various points over the last several weeks, and she is here to give you a more in-depth report on what some future community engagement could look like. And as you recall, I don't remember exactly the month, but we approved, the board approved entering into a relationship with both Marcia and Strategies 360 to support some of our future work as it relates to developing a master facilities plan, communicating that with the community and getting feedback on some of these initial ideas, and then whatever may develop out of that. So I will turn it over to her.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm so sorry that I missed the last two workshops, so I appreciate your patience. I did watch them both, and I think you touched on a lot of the things that I'm about to cover. I've tried to answer some of the questions that you asked, especially last Saturday. So you'll see that these slides look just a tiny bit different from the ones in your board packet, but really nothing substantive. It's just changing the order and adding a few comments. So I want to start by just talking about what community engagement is. It's an ongoing dialogue between the Board of Education, the administrative team, staff, parents, and community members who don't currently have students enrolled in District 205. It's especially important that we think about people whose children have graduated. They typically have very fond feelings toward the district, and people with younger students who will be impacted by the changes that you may potentially be making. And in this case, it's also the opportunity to close the loop and provide additional information about the priorities established by the community during Focus 205. So this is just a quick reminder of the Focus 205 priorities, which were to create a master facility plan with pricing and impact details that support best practices, future-ready learning, and STEM. That group also asked that the plan be shared with the full community for additional feedback. I'm not going to go through the specific recommendations. Most of them are actually addressed in the plan that's been developed by White, and the two that are grayed out are being addressed in other ways. So what is and isn't community engagement? Very broadly, it's the process of working collaboratively with stakeholders to share information, educate and update them, gather feedback, and then use what's learned to improve outcomes. Specifically, at this point, it's a tool to aid District 205 in developing a master facility plan that will support student learning, fulfill the mission and vision of the district, meet the approval of the citizens of Elmhurst, and then fulfill the commitments made during Focus 205. I think it's also important to remember what it's not, because community engagement, when you begin, is not a commitment by the board to approve a ballot initiative, finalize a plan or a timeline or a funding option. It's really a way to gather feedback. And people who participate should also recognize that this isn't a guarantee that every suggestion that they make is going to be incorporated into the master facility plan. This is obviously a democratic process, and it's going to be shaped by logistics, including educational priorities, first and foremost, cost, and timeline. So I think everybody needs to remember both of those things. These are hallmarks of an effective plan. I'm just going to touch on these very briefly and then get into each one in more detail. So an effective community engagement plan, we've talked about that it's a dialogue, and it should include defined expectations. That's consensus about what needs to be learned. It should include multiple opportunities for the district to share factual information. So we want to make sure that we reach all stakeholders, staff, parents, and community members. And we want to utilize as many methods as we can to reach those people. So that would be print, electronic, actual meetings, social media, videos, news media, you name it. We also need to have a number of options for stakeholders to provide input that can be synthesized and shared back with the Board of Education and administrative team. And then we need time to evaluate that feedback so it can be incorporated into the master facility plan and the timeline. We're going to talk a little bit about a community advisory team that's going to be formed to help us ensure that the communication is effective before it's deployed. So that important step will help us hopefully avoid any missteps in the process. What information needs to be shared? Well, you guys really hit the nail on the head on Saturday. This is a very complex plan. Stakeholders need to understand the district's needs, potential solutions, the impact that these plans could have on their own families, whether it's their taxes, their children having to change schools while something's being built, or maybe a boundary adjustment. And so we've kind of broken this down. I don't have the beautiful buckets that White had, but into these categories, which would be future-ready learning environments and programs. And you guys have talked a lot about those: STEM, all-day kindergarten, dual language, media centers, collaborative learning, flexible spaces. Those are terms that are all familiar to everyone in this room, but probably not to the community at large. They'll need to understand the state of the facilities, potential solutions, boundary adjustments, the impact of construction, the cost of the potential solutions, the tax impact, and that would be both how much and when that change will hit their tax bills, and then timetables for planning, construction, and completion. So that's obviously a lot of information that we'll have to weave into a cohesive narrative. This is a very high-level outline, and we'll give you a more detailed plan and timeline should you decide to go ahead with this project. So we've talked a little bit about what information needs to be shared, but that goes really hand in hand with gathering input. Sharing information and gathering feedback are typically intertwined. So I'm going to go through a bunch of different options right here, and forgive me, this slide's going to be up for a little while because I really want to explain to you what each of these components is and what feedback it's going to provide to you. So we've got a bunch of options that are very well suited to sharing and gathering information, and they're broken, you'll see, into qualitative and quantitative. So just as a quick reminder, qualitative information is just about the people who choose to participate in activity. If we polled everybody here tonight, that would be qualitative information. It wouldn't be indicative of your community at large, because it would just be the people who are kind enough to come to this board meeting and those of you who have to come. And as I go through these, I want you to notice that they build from small groups to large groups, because we want to see what we learn in the small groups, refine our message, and take the opportunity to answer questions before they're even asked in the larger groups. So I'm going to start with focus groups. Those are small groups. We anticipate that those will be parents and community members in the schools that are most impacted: Lincoln, Field, and Edison. And we'll start in those groups. There'll be no more than 15 to 20 people, so if we need to do multiple groups at each school, we will. So those will be discussion-based. We'll start off by giving these people who attend an overview of the plan, specifics about what might happen at their school before, during, and after construction. And then we'll have a conversation using a discussion guide. That'll be a set of questions that the moderator, who will be me, will ask and people will answer. We'll have a note taker so we can share, gather all the feedback. And then board members, architects, other administrators would be welcome to attend, but probably not to overwhelm the people in the room. So same reason that we probably wouldn't videotape them. It just makes people not very comfortable. The reason that we use a discussion guide or a set of questions is so that we can aggregate the information from all of the focus groups into some direction to you, the board. If we just let everybody go off on their own, it's going to be hard for you to sense any themes in it. But once we go through that discussion guide, we open up the floor to their questions so we can see what wasn't covered, what other concerns do they have, what do they want the architects to know, what questions maybe do they have for ICI or Raymond James. So we'll do that. We can do that as many schools as you think is necessary, but for sure we want to start with the schools that are going to be very highly impacted by this plan. We'll see what we learn from that, and then we're going to take the show out to bigger and better meetings. We're recommending 4 community meetings. We expect that there'll be 1 at each middle school and 1 at York High School. Why did we pick that? Because people like to go to a place that they're familiar with. So we'll address the feeder patterns of the elementary schools by holding meetings at the middle school. And then York High School, obviously everyone in the district attends. So you might be wondering, well, what will a community meeting look like? And that's a great question. Typically it would start with a presentation that would hopefully include or possibly include a video so that people could see all of the buildings. It's unlikely that other than the people in this room, anyone's been in every single school in this district, so you might not understand the challenges of a school across town. Sometimes they include building tours, and that's something as we develop the plan we can discuss the pros and cons and logistics of. And then we need to collect feedback from that auditorium full of people. So typically we do that using something called an exit survey. It's an online survey tool. People are given a link. You don't get the link unless you attend the meeting. So you can't stuff the ballot box, so to speak. And the reason for doing an online exit survey versus any kind of a guided discussion at such a large meeting is simply efficiency of scale. We can do guided discussions. I've trained administrators and architects to lead discussions, but it's very time consuming, and then you have to code all those notes. So by going to an electronic tool, it's much more efficient for the school district. And when I say efficient, I'm definitely saying cost efficient. So after we go through the community meetings, we'll branch out even larger. We'll go to Thought Exchange, which I know that you're familiar with from Focus 205. Malia and Kara are really the experts in that. So the one thing I'll say is you'll get similar results. The company's actually refined the tool a little bit since the last time the district used it. So we'll learn more about those changes and what information you'll glean from that. And then finally, an online survey, and we're going to try and touch everyone in the district with this online survey. And you're wondering, well, how are we going to do that? Really simply, we're going to make an informative postcard about the project. Every postcard will have a link to the survey. It'll have a unique code on it so that every household can answer the questions either once or twice, again, avoiding that stuffing the ballot box situation. And typically we recommend that the school district also open up a building. I'm sure your library has computers because we want to make sure that everyone has access to that survey if they don't have a home computer or internet. We'll also do our best to make it accessible on a mobile device. So there's a number of steps we can take so that that's very inclusive. So those are the qualitative tools that are best suited to sharing and gathering information. At some point, you may want to take the pulse of the full community again. That's usually a little bit later in the process. It's a great opportunity if you decide to move toward a referendum to test ballot language, to test messaging, to test tax sensitivity if you're choosing between two funding strategies. So that would be pretty far down the road. And yes, it's part of the community engagement, but probably not this very first phase. And I would be negligent if I didn't talk about the options that are primarily informative. Just like the students that you're working to support, adults have different learning styles and absorb information in very different ways. And our strategy will reflect that. You'll be seeing a lot of bullet points, infographics, and links throughout the materials that we develop. And you'll also see very similar information presented in different formats. Our biggest goal is going to be a consistent message in print, online, and in person. So you'll see a short version of a narrative backed up with a lot of details for the people who are interested in diving deeper into these topics. So options that are primarily informative are print materials, annual report is in the works, postcards, the district website, and electronic newsletters. And if you had the opportunity to review the communications plan that was in your board packet, you know that there's a dedicated web page for this project in development, and once we know next steps, we'll be ready to go live with that. We want to make it just sort of one-stop shopping for people. It will link back to Focus 205 and any future materials that will be developed. It can have a link to the online survey when we go that route. So we just really want to make it easy for community members to access all of this information. And of course, we'll be using social media and videos. Which leads us to the question of, what do we want to learn? It's a big question. There's a lot of questions. So Strategies 360 and I will work with the Board of Education, White, ICI, and Raymond James, the administrative team, to define the expectations. If you remember, one of the first things we talked about was defined expectations and prioritize topics to explore. We can't ask all of these questions in every survey and every focus group because people will become fatigued and unfocused. So we'll work with you on that to make sure we hit it just right. Some sample areas of inquiry are: what plan elements are most appealing and why? Are there plan elements that aren't well justified or desirable? Is there a preference for a plan option when costs are included? Is messaging clear? Are there areas where we could improve that? We'll want to gauge reaction to potential boundary adjustments and determine if timing impacts preferences. White has presented you with 2 options for one of the schools, and parents may have a very clear preference about keeping their children on that campus or speeding up the construction process, and you'll probably want to take that into account. We also touched on the role of a community advisory team. So the community advisory team, which I'm just going to call CAT from here on out, will include representatives from all schools and neighborhoods, parents, non-parents, and community leaders. And what they're going to be asked to do is vet communication and research questions to ensure that this complex plan is clear to the stakeholders who haven't been involved in the planning process. I think we've all had the experience of telling a story and everybody sort of loses the thread. We want to avoid that. So this group will help us ensure that the messages and materials are clear and easy to understand. They're going to help us eliminate or explain any educational, financial, or architectural jargon that we missed. They're going to ensure that the sequence of the story is cohesive. They're going to help us anticipate community questions and concerns so they can be answered before they're asked. A great example of this is if you take a plan out without prices, the first question people always ask is, how much is this going to cost? So if you can get some of those high-level questions answered in your presentation, you're going to get better feedback because people won't be asking the simplest questions. And then they'll also review the communication and community engagement plan to ensure that no opportunity to reach stakeholders is overlooked. There could be a community group, a meeting, a sporting event going on in the Elmhurst area that we're not aware of that they can bring to our attention so that we can have materials there or maybe have them send out an email blast about a meeting. So that would be the role of this team. And I kind of want to be clear also, we talked about what community engagement is and isn't. I also want to explain that this group is going to offer feedback on the components of the plan, the work that's been done by ICI, White, and Raymond James, the same way that every other community member will. They're going to participate in all the activities that we just talked about. They're not going to really help shape the actual plan. They're really going to be working more on making sure that the plan that's been developed is presented clearly to the community. We do anticipate that they could be key influencers because they are going to be very well educated, but we don't want to overweight their opinions versus other community members in this community engagement process. And I think I'm going to be glad to stop talking and hear you guys talk. So there's only a few more slides left. How will we get started? So this sequence of work will commence when you, the Board of Education, is prepared to share the plans or portions of the plans with the community. Every phase of this work informs the next phase. So I haven't given you a timeline here because we don't yet know what you exactly want to do, but this is the basic sequence of the work. Once we have the go-ahead about what we're going to share, we're going to develop materials and questions and timelines with input from you and the rest of the planning team. We're going to recruit CAT team members, obviously with the help of the administrative team because they are most familiar with your community members. And then we're going to meet with them to vet the materials. We'll do probably some combination of in-person and online to facilitate that process. Then we're going to update staff. They are key communicators. Parents go to them with questions, and a number of them live and vote in your community. So it's really important that we keep them engaged in this process and understand their questions and concerns and address those questions and concerns. Then we would move into the community engagement, the qualitative research and information dissemination that we just discussed. At that point, we would report findings to the planning team and the Board of Education to determine next steps and refine the plans. And then should you decide to go further, we would recommend a phone poll to confirm those qualitative findings and inform further next steps. All along the way, we'd be checking in with the Board of Education and the full planning team to ensure accuracy, transparency, and confirm that we're asking the right questions, because if we pivot, we want to make sure that you're agreeing with the pivot that we made. So there is a communication plan in your board packet. We'll be providing the district and the Board of Education with updates on a regular basis, and the district will need to provide the community, staff, and all of the other stakeholders with updates along the way. So the communication plan includes an overview of the process, goals, key audiences, messages, and timelines. The piece that's in your board packet now, because not all the details are finalized, is really a framework, and that will be updated on a regular basis, posted on the website. And we can talk about the best way if you want monthly updates at board meetings or how you want to be kept in this informed of this process, even when we're not necessarily meeting regularly to ask you questions about framing questions and the like. So I know I'm glad it's the last slide, and I bet you will be too. I just want to close by letting you know what community engagement will do for you at this point, which is provide you with data to help you understand what stakeholders think and understand about the master facility plan. It's also going to indicate areas that community members need more details about. That's where we would talk about that refinement and taking additional information out. It's going to help you establish priorities. It's going to fulfill the goals laid out by Focus 205, which were sharing preliminary plans, financial information, and raising awareness of facility needs. And if you remember back to the phone poll that was presented, last fall, that also indicated that people really support the schools but didn't necessarily understand the facility needs of the schools. So again, that's really nice when information dovetails that way. We look for that and really celebrate it. And finally, community engagement is going to offer opportunities for conversations and regular updates. And I've worked with the administrative team for about 6 months. I've been to a number of your meetings and spoken with several of you individually. I know that's a priority for you, and we know from the work that's been done in the past, it's a priority for the community. So I know you guys have questions. I hope I answered a few of them along the way.
Are there any questions from board members? Who wants to start? Margaret? Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for this presentation. And thank you for the clarification. I guess I had thought of that we would see a more detailed presentation, but it sounds like that's going to come later. that there's going to be your more detailed timeline and what this might look like. But I do have a couple of key questions just on some of the pieces that were presented. So I guess maybe to start it off, thank you for the clarification on the community advisory team. Now, it sounds like this advisory team is going to, and I want to make sure this is clear, this community advisory team is going to review the plan that has been presented, or the facilities master plan. They're going to review it, and just to make sure it's clear to the community. They are not going to be providing, and they will ask questions on maybe language and maybe try to clear things. So there's not any development that happens on the community advisory team. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct. We anticipate that once we develop the materials that'll go out to the community, so that would probably be primarily a presentation, a very hefty FAQ, and other documents like that, that they would help us go through those and make sure that those things are clear to lay people and community members who are not architects, educators, or just steeped in the business of schools and communication.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Now, these documents that are going to be developed, are they different than what the plan that we've already seen?
They will include components of the plan, but they'll be presented in a different order and in a way, they're going to have to be shorter. Those documents will live and breathe on the website, but at a community meeting, if we can get people's attention for 45 minutes, maybe an hour, we'll be very fortunate. So we are going to need, and that's where we're going to work with you, the architects, ICI, and Raymond James, to distill that down. And that's why I can't give you a specific how it's going to look and how it's going to feel, because we need to know what do you want to take out to the community before we can develop those materials. Again, trying to be respectful of your investment in our time.
Okay. And one last question specifically about the community advisory team. How will this community advisory team be selected? Will there be an open invitation? How will that process be derived?
Great question, and that's something that we have not finalized the process for. We'll work with the administrative team on that. I anticipate that they will recruit some people so we can make sure that we have broad coverage across the community. If you remember, we want to make sure we have representation from every school, from every end of town, hopefully some people who can bring some skills to this project. So I think we would recruit some people, and then we would put out some kind of an all-call, and depending on the response, consider a lottery, or I can't say exactly how the people would be selected. One option would be if the response is very big, we could divide them into groups. They could focus on different portions of the project if you don't want to turn any people away. I think the thing we want to be cautious of, depending on the timeline, is that managing that many people can take on a life of its own, and we really want to keep our eye on the community engagement process for the larger community. So again, I think that we'll have to sort of see how that plays out.
And just for the sake of transparency, can we just, whatever that process is, can we make sure that that's on the website too, on what we decided and how we decided that?
Absolutely, and no decisions will be made without consulting most of the people in this room about that process.
I didn't have any more questions on the community advisory team. I was actually going to move to another part, but I don't want to hog all the questions, so I can pause if there's other people that have questions relative to the community advisory team in particular, or other areas. If not, I'm going to, Kara?
Thanks for the presentation. It's very thorough. One thing that and I'm not sure exactly where this comes in, but how do you anticipate, we talk about the community advisory team, and how do you reach the people? It's like 70 or 75% of our community doesn't have kids in school. And so how do you really get a depth of contact with that part of the community?
Great question. Your communication department has an email list and a list of contacts throughout the community. So I would be looking to recruit at preschools, at the senior center. You have the wonderful resource of the college. You have so many community institutions. So I think we would develop an email because time is going to be of the essence in this if we want to move ahead and do any serious community engagement this spring before school ends. So that we won't have time to do a mailer, nor I don't think would I really recommend that would be how you would invest your resources. So I think we'd work our email lists, our personal contacts, and the website to get a representative group of the community. Because let's remember that their role really here is to help us explain this story to the community. They're not shaping the plan, they're just helping us vet the communication. So while I do want to be as inclusive as possible, and I applaud you for wanting to be as inclusive as possible, that's really just the very first step in kind of a long process. So I think we would have the resources to get that representation.
Okay, so could you go to the sheet or the slide with the green table? Yeah. Okay, so one thing that I think should be part of this, or maybe, I feel like there's a component of what happens if we, what happens if we don't address anything, or the cost, if you want to say the cost of doing it, but just, what do our facilities look like if we don't move forward at all with a plan? Just because I feel like some of these topics have been talked about for some of them actually a decade when it comes to facilities. So, are we to the point where we can't not do anything, or and that, anyway, I just feel like that's a piece of that has to be communicated, or a question that has to be looked at as part of, here's all the things we can do, but why do they need to potentially be done? What happens if you wait 10 years?
That's another great question. And usually that would be sort of like the closing part of a presentation. What is the cost of doing nothing? What if we do nothing? What if we delay? So those would all be questions I would anticipate would be answered in a presentation. We could certainly update this presentation before we put it online to include that question, because it's almost always part of a presentation and FAQ and any informational mailers. So.
Let somebody else go. So our presentation, we got it at the last board meeting, but we talked about it Saturday. Is there a way to put on there that it's a draft, like almost like a watermark or something somewhere? Because I think if you look at a presentation online, I think for some people they may think, oh, it's a done deal. But we know that it's this work in progress, and the board just talked about all those components. So I don't know, that's just, I don't know, that's for you, when it goes online, so people really understand it's a draft, like everything is a draft and hasn't been finalized.
I think that's a great plan, and even if we title things draft or first iteration, I think that everything could probably be watermarked. I haven't met a document that can't be.
Thank you for sharing your craft with us, and it really is. It sounds like the community advisory team are really communicators more than anything, and we have a significant number of communications professionals in our community, and I'm hoping they'll step up and kind of be your teammates in getting the word out there. It's really less about the leadership on the issue as much it is bringing that professionalism in the communications field. That being said, I want to make sure that you communicate with the leadership we do have at each of our school communities in the PTA leadership there. They know who the people are that can help them get the information out. It's really more of a communications effort than a substantive discussion. These events will do it. It looks like a very good plan. I'm especially interested in this postcard with a unique link. Will that be sent to every household? I mean, where are you getting your mailing list for this postcards to send out unique links?
In general, we send carrier route because that's the most cost efficient to do. So it's not going to have a specific name. It's just that you're going to print cards with various QR codes or something. I'm not sure. I don't know the details of that, but I do know we deliver via carrier route, and so it won't be, you, John McDonough. So.
But a unique code on each card.
That's Marcia's idea.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
And thank you, because I also want to say I was remiss in not mentioning the PTA and foundation in these plans. We always count on their efforts, much the way the entire school district and the board count on their efforts. I heard that referenced in the consent agenda, so I guess I sort of almost made too big of an assumption and didn't mention them specifically.
I just wanted to clarify to a question that Kara had about the community advisory team and how will you get to the broad Elmhurst base. And you referenced it with the community advisory team, which is very valuable. So we have a great broad section of the community on the advisory team, but also to ensure that we get to those groups with the information and to get feedback from. I think that you were addressing that in the presentation. I just wanted to make sure that it's true. That's the approach and that's the objective.
Yeah, so yes, so first the community advisory team will just help us vet that story and make sure it's clear so that if you're hearing it for the first time, it makes sense. You're going to have questions, but it's going to follow a logistic approach to. But we would also ask that group, so I'm going to assume we're going to have some preschool parents in that group, maybe some people who go to private school. And so we're going to ask them, where can we take this? What places that we're not aware of? Maybe there's an event at your historical society. Maybe there's a sporting event. It's hard for me to imagine what those things are because if I knew what they were, they'd be on my list. So we're going to look to those people to tell us about those unknowns.
Okay, because I know with the 2006, referendum, they did a really good job of getting to the broad brush of the community. And because this is the first time, I don't remember the last time, a comprehensive facilities plan was put together, and certainly it's the first time since the recession hit, and the last time you had significant amounts of money to put into your facilities, because that's typically the way that you get those funds. And so it's been 12 years, and so the facilities, we've tried to maintain them, but because they're 187 years old and et cetera, they need significant work. So I think that it's the information that we have to share with the community. Whether we want to be in this situation or not, this is where we are, and to give them a comprehensive look is important. So because of that, though, what I've said, it's been a while, because every facility needs something, and because we want to move our educational system forward, as we've heard from community and staff, we've got a twofold prong here. And so, it's almost as though I'm thinking the Focus 205, where you have several different meetings, how else do you get all of the information to the people so that they can really give us that solid feedback back? You see what I'm saying? That they're on board with this, and what they think of it is really what I'm asking. How do you do that with just single meetings versus several meetings. I mean, it's taken us a long time to get to this point, and I know from previous efforts, whether it was Dave Pruneau or, you know, Dave Moyer in the leadership chair here, helping us gather all this information that the community and the staff has asked us for a number of years now. It's taken us a while to get to the point of, instead of just asking, what do you want? It's, how will you prioritize this financially and what your desire is? And that's really what we're looking for. And so, you know, I'm thinking, how do you do it, you know, to get them all the information or get them to the point of really understanding the second piece, which is the complex sort of questions, simple questions to them, but complex issue that we want their feedback on. Do you see what I'm saying? And if you listen to Saturday, we were really articulating those pieces.
Well, I did listen to Saturday, all 3 hours and 57 minutes of it. So I'm sorry I couldn't be there to participate in that more fully. Touching on a few things that you said, if there's anybody who worked on that previous effort or any records from that last referendum, we'd welcome the opportunity to review them and talk to the person or people who spearheaded that, because you can always learn from and build on prior experiences, and we would welcome that. In terms of the community, I do hear what you're saying. Should we have a meeting about the state of the facilities, another meeting about finance? I always recommend having a finance meeting for sure. The challenge here is, how many meetings are you really going to be able to get people to attend? There's no time in the school year that's not busy, where there's not people going in and out of your buildings for student-centered events, for conferences. So at this point in time, I would recommend one comprehensive presentation that could be coupled with either financial information or school-specific details, and then we'll have to rely on online sources, print materials, and those other thought exchange online survey to both disseminate information and gather opinions. You know, the beautiful thing about an online survey is you can actually give people a paragraph to read and then ask them questions about that very specific item. And that's, again, where I think the community advisory team can help us, because we need to make sure, if we're going to rely on that information, we need to make sure that that paragraph is understandable to someone who has none of the background that people who spent 12 hours studying this topic have. So that's exactly one of the roles that we see for them. It's a challenge for every community. How do you get people engaged in this process? And it's too soon for this, but I am going to let you know that crafting your ballot question is actually really important. You'll see a lot of ballot questions that address safety and security, STEM, and certain key buzzwords like that, because there's going to be a certain percentage of voters who the only time that they hear about this is either in their absentee ballot or in the voting booth, and there's kind of nothing we can do about that. So every step of it really needs to be thought through and connected. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, you did, without giving me exactly how would you phrase questions to get to the complexity, you know,
right.
those
Well, and
sorts
I
of
think
things.
that's
And you
part,
can't do that
yeah,
at this
part of
point.
that is that we need to know what we want to know before we can give you that.
Correct, but I guess that's what I was trying to kind of get us to around to, is Saturday's discussion really did articulate the complexity of this, that we, you know, from our standpoint representing the community, were able to articulate, and that what we want to do is to be able to get the feedback from the community. Yes or no? Are they in support of this? Is that, you know, is this really what they wanted when they keep asking us for things?
Yeah, and if I that was my question on Karen's. maybe if I asking it, I hear your response, but let me ask it a different way, because it was hard for me to, when there was a slide that talked about what do we want to learn. So I kind of said, okay, so if these are our learning goals, I'm not sure how our learning goals, the information that we want to share in 4 community meetings come together and give us the iterative process and iterative development that we are talking about. So that's the part that I am not connecting with right now, and hopefully you can help me walk through that.
Sure. These are sample areas of inquiry. I didn't actually change this slide very much since it was sent out before Saturday's meeting. So we would need to work with you to really clarify these questions. Leslie and I would then work with Malia and the administrative team to craft a story to share all of that information plus the cost of doing nothing in a 45 to 60 minute presentation. And then we would develop questions that were more specific. So if we were looking at 2 plans, we would ask specific questions about what do you like about Plan A? What do you like about Plan B? Which one do you prefer? And we would work through it that way. For boundary adjustments, we need to, I would love to give you examples, but without knowing who's going to be impacted or what the boundary adjustments are. So at the very beginning, you can ask if people are opposed or in favor of boundary adjustments. My guess is initially they're all going to say we're not in favor of them. But then if they hear that no existing child or family is going to be impacted and anybody who has to change schools is going to go to a new or substantially new building, that may shape their opinion. So the one thing I would say about how are we going to get to all these questions, we can't ask all of these questions and explore all of these topics in every meeting. People will get fatigued. They won't finish a survey that's going to take them much more than 15 or 20 minutes. So it's a challenge that we'll have to work through once we understand what information we're presenting. Because right now, Leslie and I don't know what you want shared with the community.
And that, to me, that's kind of the challenge that I have in this presentation, is that I'm trying to, we want to go out, and I don't know what our timeline is, but we want to go out and talk to the community. I understand it's a generative process, and so it will continue to expound. But, starting off, trying to understand, the initial plan is presented. I'm not connecting the iterative process. I'm not connecting how we take the feedback from the first community engagement, we add the information and come back to the second community engagement meeting and present that information without presenting a different piece. So that's the part I'm trying to see how we show that we synthesize the information.
Great, I understand exactly what you're saying. So we're going to take this presentation. So let's just assume we've developed a presentation, and it's going to be the whole enchilada, everything that White has presented to you. We're going to take that, we're going to go to focus. First, we're going to take it to CAT. We're going to put it in a little bit different format because we know that took, how long did that take you to go through? 2 hours. So we're going to have to condense it. It's just clear we cannot present every slide from that presentation to the public, but it is available to them online as presented by the experts. So let's remember that. So we're going to develop a shorter, tighter presentation that addresses the facility needs and the history. We're going to show it to people, first to Kat. They're going to give us feedback and say, oh my gosh, we don't understand this word, or why maybe this slide should come after that slide, because then it would be clearer to us. And so we're going to adjust and pivot based on that. Then we're going to take it to focus groups at these schools. People are going to ask us questions. They might ask us questions like, will my child have to be bused? Will there still be lunch in the lunchroom? If those questions come up frequently, we're going to embed those answers into the presentation so that the people who hear it next time don't have to ask the same questions, and the presentation becomes more informative. So every time we meet with a group of people, we'll refine, we'll report back to you, and we'll improve. And certainly, even if it doesn't get improved maybe for a community presentation, it can certainly be improved online, which is where most people are going to go and get their information, or for future mailers. So I hope that, and it's sort of the same thing. The architects and Raymond James and ICI are going to go through a similar process. We're going to collect feedback with their assistants, and then they're going to refine the plans based on the feedback. It's one of the reasons I always say it doesn't have to be final to take it out. You actually want to offer people the opportunity to comment and see some of their comments, not all, we talked about that at the beginning, incorporated into your plans.
Yeah,
so I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Also, when you do the focus groups, we did this with Focus 205, it's nice to have an open-ended question of what did we miss, or is there a better idea? Just make sure that's available for everybody at the end too.
Right. That absolutely will be. I'm sorry, I thought I said that, because we always try and do that. The reason for the directed, consistent questions is so we can aggregate feedback. So if we have a dozen focus groups, we can say this was in general what happened at a dozen focus groups. Then we always ask an open-ended question. And the beauty of a focus group is that I could go around the room and be like, Chris, what do you think? Mary, what do you think? Even though they're looking at their computers and I put them on the spot. So we can really probe people in that kind of an intimate setting. But for the online surveys and the exit surveys, again, there'll be a set of questions that are grids, graphs, multiple choice, but always some open-ended questions at the end. And we grade ourselves on those as well. You should know that there's always one or two questions. What'd you think of the presentation? What could we have done better? We ask questions like, how did you find out about the meeting? Which is going to help you with future community engagement. So great point, and should definitely be included.
Just wanted to get your thoughts. I've had a little bit of experience with some capital development government agencies and how they present to the public, and one of the things they use, particularly when I hear you say there's time's the essence and it may just be one community meeting. What's your thoughts about that open house format that sandwiches around an active community meeting?
That can definitely be great, especially with the assistance of boards from the architects. And I want to be clear, there'll be one community meeting plan, but we're recommending 4 community meetings. And yes, we can take things on the road. If there's an open house or something anywhere in the community, you can take it on the road. It's really helpful to have handouts and things like that, a representative who can answer questions. And that's where I see the community engagement team really helping us, the community advisory team really helping us identify those opportunities.
Because if it's going to be reduced to a single critical community meeting date, people, okay, all right, then that's good. But I'd still suggest using it anyway, if you have multiples, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I can't get there at 7, but I would love to come in at 6, look at the boards, talk to someone who has a little bit of knowledge, and then, people fit it into their schedule. And then there's, what I've seen before is an active community meeting in the middle.
Yeah, and I think once we develop the meetings, decide if they should include tours. People really do like to have the boards, and I have seen White in action at many meetings, posed around their boards and answering community questions one-on-one, and it's very effective.
One last thing, when we're talking about the focus groups, and at one point in time, staff was mentioned, and Well, I guess staff was mentioned, and the word that was used, and it kind of threw me, it was update staff. I wanted to see how we would be able to gather the information from staff so they could be part of the synthesis. And I don't know if they could be part of this part of a focus group, or what your thoughts are. But I want to be sure that the staff, since they work in these buildings, they know the buildings probably better than most, would be able to gather their input on this.
That's a great question, and we would want to, once the plans are finalized, gather feedback from staff. So sometimes we'll do presentations at staff meetings, so that way it could be quite building focused. Sometimes we'll use a video. I know last time staff, I believe, participated in Thought Exchange, and they can certainly participate. We can send the link to the online survey to them. They don't need a code. And one of the questions that we ask in online surveys is, what's your relationship to the district? Parent, community members, staff, parent of current, I won't go in, there's about 20 categories. So that way we'd be able to separate out the staff to see if there's any differences between how staff and the general community feel. And if there's questions that you just want to ask staff specifically, we can do a staff specific survey.
So that's still part of the generative process? Right, it's not after everything is decided. The staff is still being included in the generative process?
Absolutely, and I would recommend that they get more updates than the average person. You have a staff newsletter, I believe an intranet. Yeah, so I would encourage extra communication to staff, because not only can they provide feedback that's going to help refine the plans, but as I said, they are your key communicators in the community. Parents often go to them with questions because they're a trusted resource, and so you want to make sure that they have the information to answer questions correctly.
As for tonight, then. Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought you were done. Go ahead.
All right, and then this is probably just a logistical question. I kind of hear a couple teams thrown around. I'm trying to understand the difference. So I've heard a planning team.
So sure, can I define them as you ask them? Okay, so the planning team is you guys. The administrative team, White, ICI, Raymond James, the people who are building the plans. It's just kind of a term we've used informally and internally, so it's not surprising that you don't know what it means. Some people might call that, some people might also refer to that as a core team. We haven't really named ourselves officially, but when we get t-shirts, we'll let you know.
All right, so we've got the planning team identified. Now I'm trying to differentiate this team, community advisory team, from the Focus 205 team, and I say that because I think I want to understand what the difference is, and I think our community will need to try to understand what the difference is. Is this a continuation? And if it's a continuation, is it the same group, or how are we differentiating these two groups?
Okay, that is not a question we have specifically discussed, but I would personally view that as two entirely different teams. People who participated in Focus 205 would be welcome to apply to be part of the CAT team, but we don't want to overweight, just like the way we don't want to overweight one part of town or one school, we want people with a fresh set of eyes. And I know you guys have had a lot of questions about the CAT, but really I just want to remind you that their role is to just help us make sure that we explain this story clearly to the rest of the community. So I appreciate that they should be thoughtfully selected, representative, and all of that. But I would view them as this is a different process, so a different team.
Thanks. And so then I asked that question: will all the information still be on Focus 205's website, or will we have a new website that differentiates this first process from the second process?
Great. So we're in the process of developing a master facility plan page. There'll be a link directly from the district website. I'm thinking it's going to be, remind me of the.
Well, we actually have developed a new logo.
No, I just was the URL.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, we're going to have a logo on the website that will indicate Phase 2. That will be a direct link, but it's just going to be elmhurst205.org/master facility plan. So I think because there's so much on the Focus 205 website right now, it's really heavy with information. I think it's very important to keep that for historical reasons. And we'll have a link on this new page to that. If anybody wants to go back and delve deeply, that's, they can do the deep dive. But we think, it's going to be easier to kind of follow Phase 2 by having a whole new page, really, that has some of those key components. Like, I think you guys have already asked if we could have, what was presented at the 2 Saturday workshops and what was presented at the February 13th meeting and then tonight. So we have that all lined up and ready to go. So just to help keep thoughts organized.
And they both link to each other.
Yes.
Tonight, we wanted to get consensus and see if the board is prepared to share, to allow Marcia to put the plans together to share with the community and start that second phase of community engagement and start getting a feedback. So I'm assuming well, I shouldn't assume anything, but I'm getting the feeling that we have the consensus for them to move forward with this work. Yeah, go ahead.
A point of clarification. So we talked about, and you mentioned it, Marcia, is that it's kind of a phased approach of going to the schools that are most impacted, because they'll have the most feedback, probably. And that's how we can refine and make sure that the information is clearly articulated and the questions are worded such that they can give us that response back on kind of the complexity. If you want do you want all these things? If you want all these things, this is what it means to you specifically. And if not, what are you willing to give? You know what I mean? What is your higher priority, lower priorities, that sort of thing. So that's what we had talked about Saturday, of doing that initially. So is that what we're asking?
I thought that we would charge Marcia to put the material that we reviewed into something that the community can look at. Like right now, it's a 2-hour presentation. Package it into something that's digestible in an hour, or 45 minutes to an hour. How is it different from what you were saying?
It might be the same. I don't know. I'm not in your head. You know what I mean? I just, but it's more than just putting materials together, because there's, you know what I mean? The point is that we're going to put it online. We're going to be taking it to people at these schools, et cetera. Pardon?
The process she outlined.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
okay.
I always recommend putting together the full presentation and the FAQs first, if time permits. We're going to be updating all of that, as particularly the FAQs, as we get community input. So why do I recommend that? Because remember, we talked about consistency in person, online, and in presentations. That becomes the base for everything else we do. So we pull out pieces for certain audiences, but if you have the comprehensive package all put together, you avoid the misstep of saying this at meeting A and this at meeting B, which reflects poorly on all of us. So that is how I would recommend it. But then when I went to a Lincoln Field or Edison, I would go into more detail about what might happen at those buildings that are slated for the comprehensive improvements, because we won't have time in a 45-minute presentation to the general community. We're going to have to kind of buzz by that, because if it's the general community, what do they want to hear? They want to hear what's going to happen in their building. So that's a challenge of a plan that's this big with this many schools. We want to make sure and White has put together some great charts for that show that we're going to end up with educational equity across the district, even though the dollars in this particular plan won't be allocated exactly the same because the different schools have different needs. So those are the kind of points that we really want to think about and come back to you with. I mean, those are ones I know tonight that will be very important to the community, but I would want to now take all of this information, go back, reread it, and really think about it versus just giving you a quick, short answer tonight. It's going to require some time and thought.
And in addition to that, I think the other thing we're looking for is your permission to start moving forward with forming this community advisory team, because it's going to take some time to get some meetings and to recruit people. That's going to take time. So while we're working on materials, we need to be working on building that group so they're ready to go to review these materials once you've said, yes, we're good with this.
Yeah, so, okay, so, and again, and I know, just make sure I understand. So what we're saying or moving forward with, what the proposal is today, is to put together twofold. One, put together this plan, this comprehensive plan with a, its first draft and a draft of the FAQs. Period. The next one is to begin thinking about this community advisory team and who it might comprise, and putting together a process on how these people will be selected, recruited, whatever term, and making sure it's clear what their role is. So that's what we are agreeing to today. Before, or we could agree to today, if we are so inclined. And then before it goes out and these meetings actually start, will we see this plan?
I just want to say that you'll see the plan, and the other thing I would recommend that you authorize the administrative team to do is to start looking at dates, because we're talking about a fair number of meetings here and people and buildings that are busy and full. So I would also recommend that that be part of what you might allow moving forward.
Are we talking about 1, 2, and 3?
I think right now, just 1 and 2, I'd want to make sure that we were in agreement about the presentation before we took it out to staff. We probably would start to develop materials for 4, which would be putting together some mailings, thinking about discussion guides for the focus groups, because that'll get back to the what do we want to know. That's a process that we're going to all have to work through. So it would probably include a little bit of 4 as well.
Is the board comfortable with that? Yes? Go ahead.
I am.
Okay.
I think that we're to the point where we need to hear from the community in more depth. So I think, we've spent a lot of hours the last couple months digging deep, and the community can watch that. But I think now, I know I personally would like to hear from the community before we think further.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, I I want to see the plan put in place. We do need to hear from community. In this, when the plan comes in place, will details also be included on what that timeline might look like?
Yes, I'm going to consider, if you see number 1, which we just authorized, it's develop materials, questions, and timeline with input from the board and the full planning team or core team, whatever we make those T-shirts to say. So yes, you will. But again, it's all tied together, much the way all of the questions that you've been asking about your plan are. So now I'm just going to confirm with you that it is the full plan, everything that White has shared with you and Raymond James and ICI. That's the full set of documents that we want to call into that presentation, correct? Okay. We're going to have to sharpen our pencils and put on our thinking caps.
No, it's complex. It's a complex story. Thank you for presenting and clarifying the community engagement process.
My pleasure, and I will look forward to working with all of you a lot more over the next few months. As well, I just have to say Leslie's not here, but we should probably give her a plug as well. So, because she's an integral part of this process, she just has to fly in from the West Coast, so we try and reserve. We're always watching out for your budget, so we always just try and reserve that for when it's absolutely mandatory. Yes, as Malia says, we are in constant contact. In fact, if you don't mind, when we sit down, when I get to sit down, I'm going to send her a text and let her know thumbs up.
Podium?
It's not a secret.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I asked Chris Welton. Chris, in light of the sad events. And,
Right there.
thank you. Oh, okay. I asked Chris to give an update on the safety committee and the work that they do. And just give an overview. We haven't done this recently, so I think it would be good for the community to hear, what we're doing from a safety standpoint.
So I am the chair of the Safety and Security Committee, but I'm more of a facilitator. I try to pull from the expertise on the committee. On the committee, we have 4 police officers that come to every meeting. We have 5 meetings per year. We have the Deputy Chief Bob Tannehill, Deputy Chief Mike McLean, and our 2 school resource officers who are full-time policemen in our schools. Both their offices are in York. One of the school resource officers is at York at all times, but they make it between the 2 of them, they service all of our schools. Also on the committee we have Don Novak from the fire department. His title is ESDA coordinator, but Don, we have a tabletop exercise that which is a crisis simulation that we do with the administration once per year. Our next one is coming up in March. Don is the facilitator of that exercise that we do with the administration. We also have our head nurse, the assistant principal, a special education supervisor. We have a lead secretary that's on the committee, a principal, our director of buildings and grounds, our teachers, Elmhurst Teachers Council president is on the committee, the director of technology, the director of communications, and a dean from York are also on the committee. And the first meeting of every year, we re-evaluate our procedure manual, and every year we try to improve our our manual and our procedures related to safety, and we do make improvements every year. Annually, we have a perimeter test where we have undercover police officers try to enter our schools. And then after the test, they meet with the principal to go over the results. Every year this is done, where they try to find doors and such to see if they can get in our schools, and they report to the principal any issues that they might uncover. Every school has panic buttons in their office, or we have, and these panic buttons are not used for just a trip or a fall or an injury where we need an ambulance. These panic buttons aren't used for that sort of thing. These panic buttons are only used for an armed intruder, and if they are pushed, the city knows why they're pushed, and they will come with the expectation that we have an armed intruder. So those are in all of our schools. I already talked about the tabletop exercise. We every year by law we have an armed intruder drill at every school. I've observed these drills, and they are well executed, and the school resource officers, if they run into any issues during the drills, they report it to the principal so that we can improve on those drills. And I met with the police department since the tragedy in Florida, and we've decided that we are going to increase the number of. We have to do one by law at every school. We're going to increase that to at least 2. We might do more at York. We're still talking about that, and we're going to do them. We're going to try and improve on how we do them in order to be more prepared for the unexpected. So that's really what. But we meet 5 times a year, so we're talking about our procedures and how we can improve at all of our meetings. Several of the Safety and Security Committee members are going to an upcoming school safety workshop in April that our liability insurance pool is putting on with some national experts in school safety. It's coming up in April, but try to go to those school safety workshops every year. At least I do, but other members of the committee do as well.
Anything from board members? Okay.
Oh, one more thing. Our doors, our classroom doors, we replaced the locks on the doors within the last 5 years. I want to say maybe 3 years ago on all the classroom doors. But if any of the classroom doors don't function properly in one of the drills, or for whatever reason, they can report that, and we can get those repaired or make sure that we are confident that those classroom locks work at all times.
Okay, thanks for the update. C, reach identification process.
Reach letters are going out this week, and I just wanted to indicate that there may be some confusion or miscommunication that has gone around. So I just wanted to indicate that there are no changes to the reach identification or placement process for this upcoming school year. We would consider REACH a program, just like all of our programs, that we would want to look at for continuous improvement over time and analyze our operations. And we will continue to do that with REACH and all of our programs. But for this next coming school year, the letters will go out this week, and there have not been any changes. So some people have expressed some concerns to me that they thought maybe there have been, and I confirmed with Learning and Teaching that that is not the case.
And thank you for that confirmation, because that is very much my understanding, what people think, that the math, that the REACH identification criteria has changed specifically as it relates to the MAP score. So is that not a true statement?
That is not a true statement. It's the criteria is the same as it was last year.
Did it change last year?
I don't think it's changed for the last 3 years or
I've looked at going 2 years back, and it's the same.
That is very interesting. That is an important communication to get out there, because I think people think that there is a change. There has been a change, particularly as it relates to the MAP scoring and the level of which, when they are in REACH and when they are not eligible for REACH.
It would have changed in 2015 because that was the last time they renormed. And so every time NWEA renorms, the cut score would change a little, and it's due to renorm again in 2018.
Okay. Freedom of Information Act.
There were 3, one requesting a specific RFP, which was denied, one requesting levy information, which was granted, one requesting employee information, which was granted. And that would be all that I have.
Are there board communications tonight? No. Okay, upcoming meetings. Wednesday, March 7th, Finance Committee meeting at 6:30. I thought that was going to be moved to 7. I'll have 7 o'clock. Okay. Okay, I'll have Ellen confirm that time for the Finance Committee meeting. And then Tuesday, March 20th, 7:30, regular Board of Education meeting, and Tuesday, April 10th, regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting. We've reached the end of the agenda. I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.